everyone. Can you hear me? Yes, no? Yes? Okay, great. All right, so welcome everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. So, with the jswec events team, please note we're starting. Welcome everyone. It appears that we're going to have another sunshine-filled conference, and I think that somehow making connections when the sun is shining is just a bit easier. And this year's theme is about making connections, which for me is a perfect theme for social work and social work education. My name is Tim Kelly, and I'm the chair of jswec. Though I sent out an email a while ago. Somebody asked me a question, and I said, well, actually, the conference organizer, John Bolton, does all the work, and I take all the credit. But I got it wrong in what I sent out, and I said, John Bolton does all the work, and he takes all the credit. So if I sent that email to you, it was an accident. Actually, he does. He's the driving force around that. So, I also wanted to reclaim a word. This is a bit cheeky to get started with this, but you know, sometimes words get used to define people and can be negative. Well, I'd like to reclaim a word and say that I'm a social work educator and I'm craptastic. All right. So those of you that are following the media will know what that's a reference to. But anyhow. You know, powerful social forces can pull individuals, families, groups, communities, movements, and professions apart. And certainly social work education, particularly in England, have felt the weight of those forces in recent years. So, you know, it's been a bit different in other parts of the UK and other parts of the world, but qualitatively and quantitatively, it's been different here in England. Social work education, in partnership with others, has an important role to play in helping to keep social work strong. And jswec is one place for us to build supportive and nurturing connections. So let's really use the next couple of days to make connections and leave here ready to strengthen social work and social work education. This year's conference has many different ways to connect or reconnect. Social media, again, is going to be featured. But not quite as in your face as last year. Those of you that were here last year would remember there was a big... Sorry about that. A big Twitter cloud going on as people were talking. It was a bit distracting, so we're not going to do that. But there will be lots of social media. So keep following us on Twitter, on the website. There's going to be... podcasts occurring. If you want to go up on the first floor and be interviewed for the podcast, we'd encourage you to do that. We're also going to have longer breaks this year, so you can make all those important informal connections as well. And the exhibit space and the coffee, they're all in one room, so you can also make some connections with publishers and exhibitors as well. I'd like to point out and thank Community Care, who's going to be our media sponsor this year. So Community Care will be really involved in the conference this year. You'll see them about, and we thank them for their support. You'll notice Wi-Fi information on your little brown envelopes that you got when you checked in. That is wrong. This is the correct. So make sure that when you're using the Wi-Fi to use these credentials. A couple of other announcements before we turn it over to the keynote. The Policy Press is launching a new book by Ray Jones on Baby P. That's Friday morning at, was it 9, John? 9:30? At the coffee break. It's not in the program, but make sure to note that that book launch will be launched in the coffee room at the break. Tonight's question time style debate is hosted by Ruth Smith from Community Care. Unfortunately, one of the panel members, Alan Wood, is now not able to attend. However, we're going to have a full panel that includes Chief Social Work Advisor to the Scottish Government, both English Chief Social Workers, the Council on Social Work Education, APSW, Association of Professors of Social Work, as well as newly qualified social workers. So please attend that. It should be a good debate. And if you want to pose a question for the debate, if you could tweet that to at jswec, that would be helpful for the debate. because of the debate tonight, we've got a couple of different dining arrangements available. The debate starts at 7:30, so you can go to dinner at 6:30 and then be back for the debate at 7:30. Or we put in an extra coffee break, so you could have a coffee at 6:30, go to the debate, and then there's some people going out for social care curry after the debate at 9. So if you're going to do that option, you can have a bit of sustenance at the coffee break before the debate. Also tomorrow, we're proud to this year to start the John Faciliatis Award, and that's going to be tomorrow morning. The winner here is here and will be presented. There's more information about that in your program, but we're pleased to be able to honor Professor John Faciliatis as part of jswec now. I'd like to give a special thanks to this year's planning group. For those of you that are on the planning group, would you please stand up, raise your hand so people know who you are? A few of us gathered around. We're looking to increase the representativeness of the planning group. And if you'd like to be on the planning group, please contact me. You need to be affiliated with a university that is a member of the jswec, Joint University Council Social Work Education Committee, or be one of our affiliated with one of our key partner organizations. Before we turn it over for the keynote, John's going to come up and explain how we're doing some sort of challenge quiz thing.
Okay, so in a bid to encourage a bit of engagement and cooperation and liaison with the exhibitors, we've done an online challenge. So there are a series of 6 quests that you can take part in. Some of them will be answering questions. Some of them you'll have to visit the exhibitors and speak to them to find out the answers to those. Some of them you'll find dotted about the hall and the grounds. You don't have to do it, it's a bit of fun. If you do want to do it, I will be issuing passwords to all delegates later on this afternoon. It's on a different website that we normally use. So if you do want to do it, great, please take part. It's a bit of fun, there are some prizes at the end of it. If you don't want to do it, no worries. We hope you do. There are some quite good prizes. There are some prizes from most of the exhibitors. We've got a set of Ivor cards from George Julian. We've got some books from Sage. We've got some books from Policy Press. We've got some books from Kerwin McLean. So well worth taking part if you want to do that. But as I say, it's just a bit of fun, so don't worry too much if it's not your thing. And I'll send information out this afternoon. Some of it will involve selfies. If you don't know what that means, don't take part in the game.
Or learning selfies are fun. All right, now without further ado, it's really my pleasure to introduce Harry Ferguson from the University of Nottingham, who is going to be giving our opening keynote address this morning called "Putting the Life Back into Social Work: Learning about what social workers do and how they do it well." So we'll get Harry. I'm not going to steal any of his time because we want to hear all about Harry and his work. Thanks.
Thanks very much indeed, Tim. And thanks very much indeed to the organising group for inviting me to give this keynote. It's a great privilege to be able to do this, to have this opportunity to engage with you all like this. It's traditional to tell a little joke or something as an icebreaker when you're in this kind of position, but I'm not going to do that because I don't trust jokes anymore. Not since I gave a lecture in Spain that was instantaneously translated. And the audience all sat there like you were with their headphones on. And I did tell a couple of jokes, and people laughed. And afterwards, I was talking to the interpreter and about her craft, and I said, even the jokes seem to go down quite well. And she said, "Oh, jokes are really hard to translate." She said, "What I always do is I say, the speaker has just told a joke, please laugh." Okay, so I want to take this opportunity to get us to reflect on some key aspects of the nature of social work itself and what we know and understand about it as a practice and what social workers do. And as a way of starting, I want to enlist the wisdom of Olive Stevenson, who passed away last year. And in her memoir that was published shortly before she died, she writes of her experience as a social work student at LSE in 1952-53. We were people whose clear task was to raise standards of child welfare in the country. So this prompts me to ask, what do we want our students to say their clear task is today? What is it we want social workers to do, to be about, and service users to receive? As educators, are we inspiring and instilling in our students a belief that they can raise the standards of service users' lives? And what skills and knowledge do they need to be able to achieve this? As researchers, are we producing the kind of data, insights, knowledge that can truly help to promote learning and the best possible outcomes for service users? What is your vision for social work? What is our vision for social work? To what extent does currently existing social work as it goes on today meet our visions forward? And how can we find out? Now, as everyone here will be painfully aware, we live in troubling times. There is much that we have to defend against. The politics of austerity, cuts, privatisation of services, unfair criticism of social work, social workers, social work educators. And as Tim has already alluded to, just a couple of weeks ago, the president of the Association of Directors of Social Services complained about academics writing letters to the Guardian opposing the privatisation of child protection while churning out crack social workers. Now, I'm going to take a bit of a risk here. I thought maybe a collecting bonding experience would be for us to all, on a count of three, to go boom. 1, 2, 3, boom! And you can tweet that as well. I can tweet boom. Now, isn't this appalling? Yeah? And then there's all these reviews of social work education that are suggesting and proposing reforms that precisely the moment when the other reforms will begin to be implemented. Our students aren't clever enough, we're told. So what I want to suggest, and this isn't exactly a revelation, is that in some key respects it feels like the life and the dignity are being squeezed out of social work. And this is certainly so for many service users as they experience cuts in services and income. Without denying the problems that do exist, I'm going to argue that we have given insufficient attention to the life, the vitality, and the creative energy that are there, and the ways that social workers are raising the standards of people's lives. When we look closely enough at what social workers actually do, I think it's possible to find an alternative narrative to the constant negativity. And we do need an alternative narrative. And I do think it's possible to even talk about and identify inspirational social work. Now, obviously, there's a huge amount of valuable research that exists in the social work canon, huge amount of knowledge. But one thing I think we haven't been good enough at, and we need to get much better at, is getting right up close to practice. There's obviously, as everyone in this room will be aware, a very rich and honourable tradition of observation of social work practice in practice learning, observing social work students in their practice encounters. Social worker Andy Pitt has put it in a celebrated phrase as far back as 1987, is an invisible trade. Meaning it goes on largely behind closed doors, most often in service users' homes. So, what's interesting is that, or I think is interesting, is that Andy never actually left the office. In terms of the ethnography, the sort of ethnographic approach that Andy and many others since have adopted, it's been very office organisational based. It's institutional ethnography. What I'm going to talk a lot about today is some work that I've been doing around the need to observe practice close up. Yeah? Practice ethnography. So if ethnography involves participant observation of naturally occurring events, the kind of naturally occurring events that I'm going to talk about, what's needing to observe more of, is the work that practitioners actually do with service users, face-to-face encounters. My own journey in this respect began in 2008 when I began to do some research observations. I was lucky enough to find a very helpful social work team who allowed me to observe their practice. I was very tentative at the beginning and had lots of concerns about ethical issues. And we worked out a kind of a procedure which was ethically sound in terms of the researcher being present. These are obviously very sensitive encounters, getting meaningful consent from service users, and so on. So the first run of observations I did, I drew on and used in the book that I published in 2011, Child Protection Practice. This is not a plug for this book, right? I just thought of the image of the child behind the door, looking out. And this kind of represents for me the kind of challenge that I'm sort of referring to this morning about, we've got to get beyond that door as researchers, just, shadowing social workers as they encounter those sorts of challenges. And the kind of oh yes, and then, sorry, I did a larger study then in 2012. 13, and I've now observed something in the region of 100 sort of practice encounters, and they form the basis of a lot of what I'm saying this morning. So the kinds of questions, research questions, that I've been posing are very straightforward, really. What do social workers actually do? Obviously, I'm interested in child protection, so how do they perform child protection? Where do they do it? I discovered that they mostly do it in the child and family home. But where in the home do they see children on their own? Social workers are required through guidance to see children on their own where there are concerns about possible significant harm. The most common place where they see children on their own is in bedrooms. In their bedrooms, in the child's bedroom. So how do social workers do what they do? What do they say? How do they act? And what is the lived experience of doing it? How does it feel? This is about bringing the emotions and so on into the frame. This is about researching live practice and adopting mobile methods. Shadowing practitioners in the car, on their way to see families, interviewing them on the way there about their expectations, their plans, their feelings. Walking along with them on the street, into the home, schools, wherever they go to see service users. Observing and audio recording the encounters between the practitioners and service users. Interviewing the practitioners on the way back about what they experienced, why they did what they did, how they felt about the piece of work and the experience they just had. And also incorporating some attention to what goes on when we get back to the office as well, interviewing some managers and so on. One of the things I learned from doing this, and my first run out of this material was at jswec last year, and I just had a chance to start to sort of reflect on the methodology. And one of the things I learned was the importance of staying really close to practitioners, shadowing them and following them wherever they go. So if they went upstairs into a child's bedroom to interview a child, I needed to go with them. The researcher needs to go with the practitioners to find out what they do, even in the family's most private spaces. And getting consent from participants to do that. And this is the Velcro approach. Sticking to practitioners, getting that close. That's how close I think we need to get if we're really going to find out what practitioners do in a kind of intimate way, produce kind of intimate knowledge that we need to. And there's a growing interest in this method. And I know there are studies underway by Sally Holland, Gillian Rush, Gillian Cree, Karen Winter, Don Forrester, Chris Hall, Juliet Nebraska, who I've already met here, Andrew Hill from York. So it's good to see this method developing. So, what did I find? So my first point is about what we can learn from what social workers do about how we conceptualize the very nature of what social work is. Yeah. I wonder why there's such a big gap between me and you. You feel an awful long way. I'm talking about intimate things. And I am intrigued by space and how. So I'm reflecting an action here, so to speak. Now, there's a very well-established narrative in social work about the impact of performance management, computerization, procedures, paperwork, across all sectors of adults and children's social work, as everyone here will know. There's kind of key concern about there being limited time to do direct work, to do relationship-based practice, because computers are taking up so much time and so on and so forth. Targets, audit culture, timescales. There's no doubt about it. What I have learned from shadowing practitioners supports all the evidence about the sort of deadening effect of the computer, of the screen, of timescales. This is a real social work office with a real place. A real social work office. And of course, these kinds of environments are under threat too, aren't they? Through the emergence of hot desking, having a dedicated desk. The great recent paper by Darwin Jason shows this. Yeah? The different kind of affective relationships that occur in office spaces when workers don't have their own dedicated spaces and desks. When you are on duty in the morning, you have a sort of a duty head-on. It's the kind of typical quote from workers about kind of deadening, disembodied effect of staring at the screen we've got to be very careful, I think, that we don't construct a very static, sedentary conception of social work, with the social worker just glued to their desk. So I want to suggest a different kind of conceptualization that I call the practice cycle. So here we have the office with the worker at their computer, a target, time scales, all those things I've just referred to, they're so influential. But in terms of the shaping of social work, the office and the organisation are just one aspect of a more total process. What I call a practice cycle. You've got to make a journey. In order to see service users, you've got to leave the desk, leave the office, go on a journey, usually by car. You'll always be doing some walking, up to the doorstep, knocking on the door, getting into the home, confronting all the challenges that can often present. Issues to do with the kind of welcome you get, the sort of atmosphere that you walk into. So many social workers in my studies don't like dogs. A lot of strangers in homes that kind of distracted them or intimidated them or they felt uncomfortable about. All those kinds of challenges around, the interactions that go on, the degrees of parental cooperation and resistance, the preparedness of the service users to relate, and so on. Then there's a journey back. And then a debrief, hopefully, in the office. And all those sort of organisational issues kick in again in terms of the quality of support workers get to make sense of what's happened to them in the encounter. And at the heart of this is the self of the practitioner, mediating everything that's going on. What I want to suggest is that it's the totality of all these different stages and this kind of flow and flux of this cycle that determines what practice is. And we need to think about the different, it's observed, different patterns of practice are observable in terms of how these different factors, processes interact with one another. So what I'm suggesting is that this is where so much of the life that sort of epitomizes what social work is goes on, and we have given relatively little attention to it. So this is about putting the life back into social work, mobilizing it. Social work is a mobile practice, and what I think we need to try and understand much more is how practitioners must relate to service users while on the move. Yeah? And we need to reframe matters to consider how is the time that workers do have and spend in face-to-face work with service users actually used. Yeah? So as well as the impact of systems, which seems to me to get a lot of attention in the literature and so on, we also need to think about the use of self and presence, the kind of presence that's needed to be an effective service user face-to-face with, effective social worker face-to-face with service users. Now there's a whole kind of theoretical underpinning behind what I've been saying and what I'm going to want to say, and I'm not going to spend an awful lot of time on this. have Les Back, a great sociologist from Goldsmith, talking about the need for live sociology, which is an argument for a more artful and crafty approach to sociological research that expands the attentiveness of researchers. We have John Murray's work on mobility and a whole kind of new interest in social sciences in movement. Sarah Pink is talking about sensory ethnography, where all the senses are brought into play in terms of how we understand how people act. Within social work, that this resurgence of work over the last 10, 15 years around the use of self, Julian Rush, I think, compellingly argues that there's a relational turn has gone on in social work in terms of a re-emergence of acknowledgement of the importance of relational dynamics, using psychosocial theory to understand encounters and so on. And then we have Bree Ferguson, Sue White, and Kate Morris's recent work on relational welfare, where they provide a really salutary reminder to us that service users are not atomized individuals, but they're embedded in families, social relationships, communities, and power relationships and inequalities. Yeah. They argue we need to reanimate service users. Yeah. I think we need to reanimate practitioners as well in the way that I've begun to point out. And there's some amazing work going on in human geography and in anthropology around doing really interesting work on sort of the notion of embodied performances, on the moving body, on what it means to be alive in the world. Tim Ingold, a great anthropologist from Aberdeen, says that social science has been head over heels. It's been too rational. And he argues for a need for what he calls culture on the ground, viewing everyday life through the feet, through lived experience, through what happens when we move and experience the world in its fullness. And I just want to give a big shout out to David Crosby Appleby. Another way the DJ said, big shout out. Big shout out to Dave. Thanks, Dave. Because for his conceptualization of social work in terms of the social worker as practitioner, professional, and social scientist. Yeah. Social workers, in my view, are applied social scientists. Yeah. And some of the quotes that I'm going to show you now bear this kind of sophisticated knowledge base that social workers embody. And he seemed to get us, didn't he? Yeah. I think he did. I really welcome this. I'm going to have a drink. Cheers, guys. Right, getting to the service user. They are real social workers' genes. They're my genes. So we're now going on this little journey. Right? I'm going to take you on the journey, the typical journey that practitioners make. This is typical. So in terms of like doing driving and doing interviews while driving and walking, this is typical of the kind of things that social workers would say. About how they have to make a transition. Remember the work that you've got your duty head on. Well, here's the worker talking about how, on the journey, I've forgotten about the office now. I'm thinking about I'm not thinking about any of that. And I'm just thinking about, I've cut out everything else, and I'm just thinking about going there, really, going on a visit. I don't know how to describe it, it just happens. Oh, psychologically, you've got to be ready now to be thinking quicker, very quickly at unpredictable questions. Like in the office, you've got time to think. Maybe not on a telephone call to a service user, because they could say anything. But in general, sort of a little bit, you don't have to be on your toes as much. So the worker is articulating the need to prepare the self for a particular kind of presence, a process of needing to come alive. So the challenge is to make this transition in a way that they not only come alive, but stay alive. And how that transition is managed matters a lot. So let's go inside the world of practice. Social workers, in entering people's lives, classically in their homes, step into the fullness of life as lived. They have to deal with, I've already referred to this, the impact of the home itself, pets, atmospheres, whether it's welcoming, hostile. This is an emotional, sensory experience. Gaining and maintaining composure and creating the kind of order that's needed to conduct the sort of work that you need to do is a skilled performance. And we need a language for these experiences. So if you think back to that practice cycle image that I put up a few moments ago, it suggested that there are different patterns, different practice patterns that arise from these interactions, these transitions, how they're managed around this cycle. And I'm going to focus on two of these this morning. What I call an automated pattern, where the worker is physically awkward, intuitively and emotionally absent. And I think we can really, use extending a metaphor of life and so on, talk about dead or near-death social work. Now I'm going to talk about what I call the intimate pattern. And one of the things I think we need to do, Clifford Geertz, the great social anthropologist, talked about observation and qualitative research in terms of producing thick descriptions of everyday life. I think we need thick descriptions of social work practice. I'm going to give you one now to illustrate this automated pattern. The case was referred by another professional concerned about the neglect of a 2-year-old girl and a 5-year-old boy by their single-parent mother, who I call Mrs. Smith. So there's 2 children, a girl aged 2 and a boy aged 5. The social worker visited at 3:30 in the afternoon, was led by Mrs. Smith into the sitting room, where there was another adult present. Both children were present for the duration of the visit. Mrs. Smith was clearly angry. She felt that she was being persecuted by the professional who reported it, so the atmosphere in the home was tense. The social worker's first words when we came out of the house acknowledged this. Quote, "She was simmering underneath. I think she was trying to keep her temper, wasn't she?" End quote. From the outset, the social worker seemed to be at a loss to achieve any composure. She forgot to tell Mrs. Smith her name, and about 11 minutes into the visit, the social worker remembered and apologized. She was totally non-relational towards the children. She didn't speak to them or relate to them non-verbally, despite them being right there in front of her. The social worker's assessment completely lacked depth. This was in part because she used many leading questions. In talking about the children to Mrs. Smith, she said, quote, "What about their behaviour? Have you got any worries about that? They seem lovely." What about their behaviour? Have you got any worries about that? They seem lovely. Now, what do you think the mother said? Go on.
Yes,
Thank you. Yes, they are lovely. And that was the end of the conversation. And one of the things I learned from this kind of methodology is that, when you audio record and analyze these conversations, you can see how practitioners, consciously and unconsciously, adopt questioning styles where they give the sort of answer they want. It's a positive one. So it cuts down the Because that's their primary kind of interest. You know? To get at it. The social worker did manage to ask if she could see the children's bedrooms, and Mrs. Smith very reluctantly allowed her to see upstairs. As always, I sought consent to follow, which was given, and the social worker had the most cursory of glances and was back downstairs again within a minute. The visit lasted 15 minutes and completely lacked depth or real purpose. On the journey back to the office, I asked the social worker what she made of the man who was in the house. And her reply was, quote, I thought it was a girl. But then I did look at her legs and they were very, very hairy. And then I thought, maybe it is a man. But no, I think it was a girl, but I'm not 100% sure. End quote. This was very unusual in the context of the research I've been doing, because one thing that social work has become, well, we're not that clear about how what it was like historically, but one way it certainly was, in terms of what I observed, is very authoritative. Yeah? Social workers were generally very determined to find out who has got access to these children, get their names and details, do police checks, and so on. So this was unusual. Yeah. The worker showed no interest whatsoever in trying to establish who this person was. Right there in the room. I asked the worker about how she felt she related to the children, whether she considered talking to the 5-year-old. And she replied, yeah, I could have done. I couldn't, I really. But I didn't think about it at the time because he's only 5. Now, this reasoning about the child being too young was not plausible, as this same worker had interviewed a 5-year-old on another case that I shadowed her on. And then she said, quote, but I'll be honest, I didn't even think about it. I don't know why, but I didn't. The worker obviously continued to reflect on this for the rest of the journey, because as she was getting out of the car at the office, she said, I don't know why I didn't talk to him. Although in the presence of the children, they had ceased to exist for this worker. They were invisible. And on the journey back, in response to some gentle, open-ended questions, they were beginning to come into mind for her. Not only had not talking to the children become unthinkable, but the fact that she had not talked to them was not even known to the worker in any sense. Her thinking was that novel. So how can that happen? So what defines this pattern is how workers go through the motions in an essentially non-relational manner. They're physically present, but they're emotionally and intuitively absent. It would be very easy to blame the workers and hang it all on them as being poor practitioners, but we need to do it in terms of the cumulative effects of what I'm calling the practice cycle. So what I found was that there were kind of systemic and organizational pressures exerting themselves in these kinds of scenarios. Generally, practitioners felt that they had short amounts of time, where they were permitted to spend short amounts of time on their own with children. So there was a sense of a kind of systematic kind of automation of practice in that sense. The sense that you had better get back to the office. This definitely played into it. So that, everything that we know about that I've already referred to, the impact of timescales and so on, is kind of evident in this kind of example. I don't think this worker ever really got out of her duty head. She'd been on duty all morning, right through till 3 o'clock when she left the office. She never got into that kind of embodied or live state of mind that she needed to be, to have that sort of presence that that previous social worker I quoted was talking about. So she turned up in that kind of detached, defensive way. Then there was the impact of emotional Julian Rush talks about how practitioners adopt avoidant defensive strategies. Then add to that sort of poor supervision, poor debrief, no opportunity for the worker to reflect. And you get automated, dead social work. But it's not just all about systems. There was definitely a correlation between these sorts of outcomes and sort of patterns of practice and practitioners whose bodies seemed rigid, they were ambivalent, if not avoidant, in terms of what, they're avoidant of getting close to service users. They didn't like playing or being touched, like children playing on. Being touched by children. They told me that. I'm drawing on their own accounts. So this is about the interplay of systems and personal biography and relational capacities. And this, of course, is the version of social work that dominates the public domain, isn't it? The automated, dead social work. This is why we need to be brought back to life in all the ways that so many people out there are telling us. Now, I hope I might cheer you up a bit more. Are you with me? Yeah. Are you getting this? That's a picture of Eileen Monroe. She has confirmed that is her. This is not Photoshop. When she was doing her review, job text review, she went on a home visit, and the media called her, and this is a child that was on child protection plan, and everything was now okay, and it's obvious she's hugging the child in that sort of really intimate way, so this picture obviously kind of symbolises something really important about what I'm trying to get at in terms of this intimate practice, intimate pattern. So, more thick description from a case that typifies what I'm calling the intimate pattern. The case involved a 5-year-old boy who I will call Edward, and a 7-year-old girl who I will call Beth, being cared for by a lone-parent mother who I'm going to call Jennifer. So we've got a 5-year-old boy who I call Edward, a 7-year-old girl, Beth, and the mother is Jennifer. The concerns surrounding neglect in terms of how the children were presenting in school, dirty, and exhibiting disturbed behaviour and control problems, including concerns about Edward acting out in very sexualized ways, and there have been concerns in the past about partners possibly sexually abusing the children. Family support services have been involved for some time, but Jennifer would no longer cooperate. There was a new boyfriend thought to be on the scene, and social work was concerned about finding out about him too. It's the social worker's first visit to the family home, having had just one contact with Edward in school. So she'd had one contact with Edward in school, she'd never met Beth before. The dog was barking as Jennifer answered the door, and 5-year-old Edward immediately jumped into the social worker's arms as she stood on the doorstep. The social worker hugged him into her and carried him into the house and put him down in the kitchen where Jennifer had left. The social worker moved into the staging room where she enthusiastically met 7-year-old Beth. One of the social worker's key aims was to see upstairs. Soon after we arrived, Beth announced that she was going to her friends to play, and this led the social worker to ask Beth in an enthusiastic way if she would show her her bedroom, which the worker told me afterward was much sooner than she expected, so she planned to do. But with Beth happy with it and on board, Jennifer agreed to the social worker going upstairs. The two children's bedrooms were in a very poor state, with dog feces on the floor, dried out urine-stained mattresses. The worker did not simply inspect the bedrooms, but spent time up there and in them, 13 minutes to be precise, as part of getting trying to get a sense of the internal world of these children, what it's like to live in this house and in this family. On On going downstairs, the social worker spent time with Jennifer, who was cooking in the kitchen, and told her that she was very concerned about the state of the bedrooms, while also making it clear that she wanted to be supportive and helpful. There was music playing, and this phase in the kitchen included the social worker dancing with Edward in her arms, when he made it clear that he wanted to be picked up. Next, the social worker went back into the sitting room and spent a further considerable period of time relating to the two children. On entering the room, she headed straight for the family photos on display and used them to engage the children, telling them what beautiful babies they were. Beth never actually left the home, which wasn't surprising given how the social worker was with her. The social worker told Beth what beautiful eyes she had and how lovely her hair was, touching Beth's hair several times as she said it. She dropped down to the children's level, on her hunkers, getting onto the floor and skillfully explained what her role is as a social worker, checking out whether they understood. In the sitting room, Edward was restless and in an almost permanent state of movement, alternating between climbing over furniture, falling off it, and sitting beside or on top of the social worker. 30 minutes into the visit, Jennifer's new boyfriend turned up and sat himself in the armchair. The social worker was sat on the settee opposite and was explaining her role to him, and that she needed to see him on his own to find out about him, do police checks and so on. Edward was stretched out on the settee, lying beside the social worker. While writing down the boyfriend's details with her right hand, the social worker began stroking Edward's face and hair with her left hand, telling him how good he is. To which Edward replied, "No, I'm not. I'm stupid. I'm stupid." The social worker responded, "You're not stupid. You're beautiful." To which he replied, "I'm stupid." The social worker told me afterwards how she suspected that Edward in particular, quote, doesn't get much love or affection. Quote, "Those kids, I've not had the case long, but I know that they don't get very much physical affection, so that's why the stroking of the face is, and you could see as you stroked his face, like a cat or a dog will kind of put their head towards you. He had a little bit of emotional comfort there, and that's how he responded. So there is that, and that positive praise about, actually, you are beautiful, you've got lovely hair, you've got nice eyes, good things about them. You're probably the only positive person who comes in and gives the children any attention at all. So when I go in, I will sit with them and we'll spend time with them because I'm supposed to be their social worker that they trust and want to have a relationship with. How am I going to get them to make any disclosures or talk to me about what they're feeling or make any changes if I haven't got some form of relationship with them? The visit lasted 61 minutes. The social worker went on to do intense work with the children, with Jennifer, mobilizing the support of her extended family, intensive family support, and so on. So, I hope you can see why I call this the intimate pattern. Yeah. This is a live social work. Yeah. Workers in this pattern need to be able to handle each stage of the practice cycle effectively. Yeah. They did thoughtful preparation in the office, supported now by peers, managers. They were able to do the kind of coming alive work in the car that we've shown to be important, vital. I don't think it has strategies for engagement, but it's more than engagement, I think, that we see here. It's a kind of immersion. An immersion in the moment. Yeah. And a capacity to get really close to service users and develop rapport very, very quickly. Tremendous spatial awareness and movement. These are workers with very flexible, mobile bodies, with the capacity to play, to be tactile, example of a worker, as Michel Lefebvre puts it, using touch to communicate comfort. There's no doubt about it, these workers push boundaries right to the limit. Yeah. There might be some people here who feel that worker went too far. Yeah. Usually when I present these kinds of scenarios to practitioners, some people, there's always some people in the room who say they wouldn't stroke a child's face like that. Because they're afraid of being accused of child sexual abuse. Yeah. They're afraid of being seen to be kind of grooming a child like a sex offender would, and so on. Yeah. We can debate the ethics of touch. Yeah. But these sorts of case examples take us into those kinds of totally necessary conversations and debates. They have a capacity to bear suffering, a willingness to bear suffering. When that worker got close to that little boy, he told her something about himself, didn't he? About his low self-esteem. He'd be hypothesizing about trauma. I'm not good or beautiful, I'm stupid. Yeah. And this is not just about bearing emotional and psychic pain, but adults and children's social suffering. Yeah. The shame and the impact of inequalities and poverty, so well shown up by Bruce Feddison, Steve White, and Kate Morris in their book, Reimagining Child Protection. And what I think these workers embodied was a charismatic use of self, where they were able to bring comfort, hope, and change to service users. We see it here in a longer term scenario. This is a case where a woman who I'll call Mary, a 24-year-old woman, she had 4 children taken into care. The last 2 were removed at birth due to significant addiction problems, relationships with abusive men, and so on. But with a lot of support, she turned her life around and she was enabled to keep her last child, her last baby, who I'm calling Mia, now 15 months old. 5 months prior to the research visit, she had had a relapse. Relationship with a man who was regarded as a positive factor had broken down, and her daughter was taken into care, but was now having returned a couple of months before this encounter here, in return to Mary. And the social worker said, "Yeah, you were very young when you had your children, weren't you?" And Mary says, yeah, so I was still in that mentality that all social services are bad and everything. And obviously I had my children taken, you know that. I had to work for social services. Social worker says, we're not all that bad after all. Mary says, no. You're a professional friend, I would say, Social worker says, yeah. Someone that can help in certain circumstances. And the social worker says, it's nice that we can see that we can help. This is how that social worker interrelated. One snapshot of how that social worker interrelated with Mia. She was on the floor, kneeling on the floor beside Mia. Yeah. And she said, this is where I'm coming out, so I can play. It's coming, gotcha. Child lads, workers. I could play with her all day, she's lovely, can't you? I have to go back to the boring office now and do some work. Where's Mia? Boom! So these are workers. This is like an arm. This is the boot of a car. Yeah. These are all the play materials that she routinely carries around with her. Yeah. The social worker that needs automated patterns who I'm suggesting are rigid and lack sort of relational capacity did not routinely take things around with them. They did not have those kinds of resources in their toolkit. Yeah? They weren't ready to engage in meaningful ways. They weren't prepared in the literal sense. Inspirational social work. We can debate some of the nuances of those illustrations I've just given. I'm suggesting to you that there is an inspirational character to this, the kind of social work that I've just been outlining in terms of that sort of insight pattern. Yeah. Time is crucial. Everything that's argued about that, about sort of system design problems, the need for more reflective management, it's all completely born of what I've been saying. But there is a personal dynamic to this. Yeah. Workers have to have the core relational capacities. Yeah. These inspirational social workers were good at monitoring themselves, monitoring their use of touch in kind of risk-assessed ways. But they did push boundaries. Typically they would tell me about, keeping in touch with children who left care. Getting permission from our agencies to be allowed to do that, and so on. So they were like strength-based and very motivational individuals. In their presence, you could feel them willing people to engage, to change. So there are virtues that are crucial to social work and that we need to celebrate. Compassion, courage, and that kind of vigor. That's sort of intrinsic to everything I've been saying about how the use of the self in an embodied, sort of mobile way. These are about ethical commitments, and what Sarah Vance calls ethics work. Yeah. In terms of negotiating that tension between professional accountability and personal engagement. So what we see here is a kind of virtuous cycle of change in how the worker transmits their will to help, the desire for transformation to service users. And service users reflect that back through positive engagement. And there's even laughter and joy in some of these encounters. As we see. Why isn't this, why is it the automated, sort of dead, near-death kind of perspective on social work that dominates public debate? What do we need to do to get this sort of narrative center stage? And at the outset, I raised the question, taking the impetus from Olive Stevenson, what is our vision for social work? Yeah. Well, here's mine on the basis of, evidence-based practice. I would claim, on the basis of qualitative research, this is an evidence-based vision. Yeah? That every contact with service users has a positive impact in promoting safety, justice, and helping to address suffering, heal trauma, and create therapeutic change. And I've used some of these case studies in trainings with social workers and with students. And they tell me that they find them inspirational. Yeah. They write it on the evaluation forms. I'm not hosting it. Because it's not about what I'm doing, it's about them experience and having access to real, live social work that reflects back to them their own creativity and excellence and gives them a different narrative other than this deficit-driven one. Yeah? And they also learn about, what they have to do to develop those sorts of relational capacities and so on and so forth. So they'll grapple with often undiscussed areas like how comfortable they feel moving in the presence of service users, how they get stuck, how they use touch, avoid using it, and so on. Yeah. So this is about education and training, using this kind of knowledge to develop workers' self-knowledge and capacities for intimate, alive social work. I'm just going to finish by acknowledging some other signs of life. There's life in social work. And there's all sorts of cameras and things pointing at me at the moment. It's all got really complicated doing these presentations. Hello out there. It's being live streamed. So digital social work, social media have opened up all sorts of new opportunities, I think, for us to kind of communicate in online communities, through blogs, and so on. You know, in terms of making this other narrative, or whatever narratives we want, you know, we feel proud of, and so on, inspirational social work, and so on. This is my joke. The use of selfies in social work. This is the one bit of self-indulgence I thought I would allow myself. Because I want to write a paper someday about title, so nobody else is going to steal it, right? The use of selfies in social work. There's Joanne. That's good. Maybe more. We tweeted this morning, but you couldn't really hit it, you regret it. And two wonderful practitioners from trainers from Huddersfield, which was taken when I had the privilege of visiting youth plan. And in terms of, you know, one of the most striking points about so-called craft social workers, here we have Leanne McGovern tweeting the article that she wrote in Music Care. And with craft social workers were ignored the fantastic work being done in critical time and interestingly. It's back. Yeah. And then Andy McNichol tweets it. This is Music Care. I think Andy might be here. And then we have Lisa Heard actually saying something positive about social work education. Well said. That is exactly how I feel. My second year social work study, September, my tutors are an inspiration. My degree is A1. And look what happens next. Recognize him. Is he here?
No.
Has he left the room?
Yeah.
Very proud of one of my former GTs. Not Leanne McGovern. Girl done good. Yeah. So Leanne wrote in her practice, in her piece, about her passion for social work. Yeah. And there's such integrity in these kinds of narratives. And John Bolton is right to express his pride. Yeah. Inspirational social workers don't come from nowhere. Yeah. They're made by those of us here in this room. Yeah. They're nurtured by you, by us. And there is so much for us to be proud of. Yeah. So what I've been trying to do, this is my conclusion, is outline one approach that can enable us to put the life back into social work in ways that reveal the parts that are under threat, that may be dying, that may even have died. But equally, those aspects that are living and thriving, if only we look in the right places and ways to see them. This should not be mistaken for sentimentality or attempts to idealize social work without providing evidence. There are certainly some significant problems that need addressing. But we must be equally prepared to identify and do justice to and celebrate the inspirational social work that is going on. How workers can be seen to use their skills, their knowledge, their skills, their courage, their generosity and humanity to enhance the lives of service users. And it's that forms the foundation on which our visions of what we want social work to be can be built. Thank you. Yeah, I've got some time for questions. Is there a roving mic scenario? Or?
No, you just have to take them.
Okay. Okay, would you like to ask for identifications, Tim? Yeah, tell us who you are, Alan.
Yep.
Here's one.
Alan Baird, the Chief Social Work Advisor to the Scottish Government. First of all, Harry, thanks for that. I think it was inspirational. I think you nailed what social workers need to be about.
I think the question for me is, what do we do with the dead social workers? Those who, frankly, as you described, trouble me in terms of the limited resources that we are all working with across the UK and beyond, and really can we afford to have individuals who frankly don't have that inspiration, that passion, and perhaps lacking skills as well?
Well, it's a difficult question to answer, really, but it's a really important question. So, I think you can see how some potentially inspirational workers are ground down by the system. Yeah. But I do think that, you know, and with this, we all wonder how some students get onto our courses, won't we? And we want to check out who interviewed you. Well, the best answer I can give is that, you know, I suppose I am an advocate for a more kind of personalised psycho-social psychodynamic kind of approach to kind of assessing the capacity for people to do social work. I cover more information, more process analysis around that kind of helping to understand the relational style. I think we can develop everyone's capacity to relate, you know? So like one of the things I learned from observing is participants is really inspirational, is that, you know, the way that they sort of turned on their performance, they showed that they were like excited and glad to see each other, you know? So there's a performance element to this. Yeah? So I think we can actually develop people's capacities, but there are probably some who you probably can. Yeah. But I don't think, no, what do we do with them? I don't know that's really the answer.
Well, fantastic.
Got time to make one
It's
more?
the next project for me, actually. Somebody there?
Thank you, Harry. I'm Jill Gordon from University of Scotland. I totally agree with what you say about potentially inspirational social workers being ground down by the system. And I think as social work educators, we work really hard to try and support social work students that they go out on placement and the experience and come into contact with social workers who are ground down by the system. So we're faced with this kind of dichotomy about what's good, what they should be doing, relationship-based social work, and where the reality of systems and processes means they get 15 minutes to do a whole visit. So what I'm interested in, what I'm getting to, is in your research, did you discover anything about support supervision for social workers in order, in the workplace, in the real life of practice, to be supported, to be inspirational social workers and to use your intimate pattern of practice?
I didn't observe any supervision. I observed some encounters in the office or debriefs and that kind of thing. Team culture definitely matters, there's no question about it. And everything that we know about how more, sort of learning organizational sort of cultures, the style of management, made a real impact. Yeah, absolutely. And equally, there was the inspirational social workers, as I call them, never really what the inspirational ones did was they sort of used the time that they had to its absolute maximum, to its limit. Yeah. And there was a kind of culture in some of the teams of being able to sort of promote that and enable it. Yeah. We've got time for some of that.
Hello, I'm Maria Back from MMU, and I was one of the people who wrote for The Guardian, so probably a perhaps social work educator. My question really is around the extent to which you've had the opportunity to share your research with Ofsted and Estin and the inspection regimes, because as a former manager of social work services, the constant inspection and the emphasis that's given to the kinds of things that the inspectors look at, there's a need for the inspectorate to understand the importance of intimate social work, if you like, and start valuing that in their inspections, and from there, hopefully, organisations building that and valuing that more for their staff.
I haven't had anything to do with Ofsted. I'm perfectly willing to engage with them. But absolutely, my understanding is that they do not observe. There was a plan for them to observe social workers in practice in face-to-face encounters. One of the teams that I was in during the study was actually inspected. None of the inspectors went out with the practitioners. If you were to ask me what is the key thing, what's the key single thing that I learned from doing this research, and it's really banal, but it's so important, it seems to me, and that is how complicated and difficult this work is. It's so complicated and difficult. Yeah. We shouldn't be surprised that practitioners struggle and that children become visible, and that adult service users' needs aren't met, and their well-being, whatever it is, whatever these tragic outcomes. I can well understand how they happen. So whoever, whether it's senior managers, Ofsted, or whoever it is, I don't think practitioners themselves actually. I think they lose sight of how complicated and complex and how sophisticated and skillful they need to be. Yeah. So I completely agree with you. I think that message has to get out there. Yeah. Human fallibility in the context of extraordinarily demanding work needs to be emphasized, and it makes the kind of inspirational, positive achievements, I think, even more worthy of celebration.
Just wanted to thank Harry, and this is the start of the conference, so with lots of chances to continue the conversations and connect with Harry. Also, his Twitter name is somewhere around at Harry Ferguson or something like that, I believe. So continue conversation on social media as well. It's now time for lunch, and lunch is going to be out in the foyer. So please go grab yourself some lunch and enjoy the weather. And make sure you see the exhibitors, and we'll see you in the next session.